All right, we are here with 5 winemaker questions with Jean Frédéric Hugel. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's dive in. First off, where are your vineyards located and what varieties do you work with?
Located in Alsace, so central part of Europe, in between France and Germany, on the border right now French. Thank you, guys. And on the border between France and Germany. So producing essentially white grapes. White wine production is about 90% of the white wines represent about 90% of the production in Alsace. Essentially Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, and we're one of the beautiful tiny little wine regions to visit. So it's both we eat well, we drink well. It's one of the major food and wine regions of France.
Right off the bat here, if someone has never heard about the Famille Hugel, what was the first thing you would want a wine enthusiast to know?
We produce a majority of wines. Most of them are dry, and we make wines that are especially very food friendly. We conceive wines as, of course, drinkable by themselves, but always a better match when they're paired and when they're in a dinner or a plus one with food situation. And we make Rieslings, Gewürztraminers, Pinot Gris that are amongst the best, but also, well, hard to define best, but definitely amongst the longest lived. Some of our wines can live 30 or 40 years, so you should sometimes get them a little bit in your cellar.
We had a Pinot Gris at one of our Master of Wine seminars of yours that was over a decade old and nobody even could tell. So I still had years left. Speaking of wine styles, question number 3, we'll go on. What styles of these wines do you make? I think let's touch on a little bit on your style of Riesling, and because it's different than maybe some other parts of the world, and then also maybe the other like tiers of your bottlings you might have for either Riesling or Gewürztraminer or other Pinot Gris.
So very important to mention, especially to the American audience, our Rieslings are dry. We make dry Riesling. That's really the specialty of the region, and Hugel is no exception to that. We're actually high defenders of dry Riesling in the region. So gastronomic style dry Riesling, and we try to make wines that are freaking honest. That they have nothing to hide. We don't use any winemaking tricks. The wines are true to their grape, true to their region, true to their vintage. When there's a great terroir behind them, they are true to their vineyard sites, and sometimes you have to be a little bit patient. We do most of the waiting for you. Actually, we release wines on the market. Don't be afraid of an older vintage. It's actually often done on purpose. Some of our wines we wait for 10 years before we put them to market, because we know they will need that amount of time.
Brilliant. So you make your Rieslings are almost always dry, and then you have a range of the Pinot Gris and the Gewürztraminer that range from like off dry to sweet. Or do you also make a dry Pinot Gris too?
Well, Pinot Gris ranges from dry to almost off dry. Gewürztraminer is generally a little bit more off dry, and then we separate the range in 3 tiers. So classic, which is varietally correct textbook, quite literally textbook. If you open your WFTT, your Master Somm textbook, there will probably be a label of Hugel Classic Riesling or Classic Gewürz at some stage. The classic line is meant to be varietally and vintage correct. Then a stage line which bottles a little bit more aging potential on it, a little bit more depth, a little bit more complexity. You will be able to get a little bit more out of those wines if you're looking for more complexity and power and intensity. This is where you should go. Wines that are a lot of fun to drink at 5 to 10 years old. And then Gros Syrah, these are the wines for the long lasting aging. These are wines that you can cellar and forget about or leave to your next generation if you want your children to have a good drink for every one of their birthday from their 30s to 50s until their 50s. These are the wines that you can cellar when they're born. And then late harvest, one of our great specialties in the family. Late harvest wines, botrytis wines. You'll see them very, very seldomly. They are very small productions, but they are amongst the elite of the greatest sweet wines in the world. If you and this is also where the wines last the longest. So Roman Chardonnay selection are not practically invented them.
Awesome. And if listeners want to learn more, they can stay tuned for the full episode of this podcast interview with you, where we talk more about each of these wines in a little bit more detail. Moving forward, let's see which vintages have stood out to you over the years, whether it's the wine themselves or they were just memorable because of how they happen.
I'm only gonna talk about the vintages that are drinking right now. I'm gonna put a penny on 2021 and 2019, but to be confirmed. I'll try not to forget any. It's gonna be a little bit of a machine gun series of vintages. So in 2015, 2014, especially for Riesling, 2010, my favorite vintage of the century. I'm still waiting to be proven wrong. 2009, 2007, 2008, some of the greatest. 2005, especially for late harvest wines. 2000, especially for late harvest wines. Part of the great series of 97, 98, 99, 2000. Rare to have four vintages in a row where you will have a very high quality of late harvest wine. 94 just for the Gewürztraminers. 1990, possibly one of the greatest vintages, if not the greatest of the 90s. 89, my vintage, greatest vintage for SGLs at the time. The only time at that time when we had produced a Selection Grenoble tea, which was made only for the second time in 2018. Then in the 1883, fabulous wines, dry and sweet. 76, 71, the greatest two vintages of the 70s. 76, that is the legendary vintage that you get. If you find a bottle on auction of Riesling Selection Grenoble 1976 and you don't buy it, whatever the price, you're making a big mistake. Then 60, 69, 61, 64, these are the great three of the 60s. 59, 45 for obvious reasons, because it was good. It was very seldom, but very good. And it was a vintage that we had been waiting for a long time. The 34s are absolutely stunning. It's the great vintage of the 30s. 21 and 24 and 29, these are the three great vintages of the 20s. 1911 is the great vintage of the 10s. 1900, legendary wine, dry Riesling 1900s. 1888, we still have 4 bottles of straw wine from 1888, which is one of the greatest wines that our ancestors have put in the cellar. And 1865, which is the vintage of the century, but 19th century this time.
That was incredible. I'm trying to Rolodex all of those, but anybody can go back and listen. That was amazing. Great. Well, looking forward, now that we've looked back at so many great vintages, what is on the roadmap for Famille Hugel? What are you guys rolling out soon? Are there any innovations in the vineyard or the winery that you're doing?
Yes. So we're 2024 is actually the year where we're finishing our organic certification. So 25 will be the first vintage that's found organic on the estate. Despite 20 years, almost 20 years of organic viticulture, but selective organic viticulture. 2025 will be the first vintage, the first release of a Crémant, of bubbles at Hugel. If I were you, I would seriously keep an eye on this because we took it very, very seriously. We are releasing our first vintage of an orange wine, 2021, released in 2025. Small batch of 3,000 bottles of orange wines, because this actually started as an experiment, but the more it was, the more time we had, and the less it was an experiment, and the more it was starting to become really, really serious. And 2025 is the kickstart of a great project for us. The company moves through town once per century. This is the time per century. So we're moving some of our operations outside of the main walls. The winery will still stay there. Most of the production will remain there. But we will move some of our boxing and labeling and cartoning, and so we'll move some of our logistics outside of town. So we have a few projects on the line at the moment.
Sounds like a big year for you guys.
Lots of short nights.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That is 5 questions with Jean Frédéric Hugel.